Silence can look harmless at first, but in relationships it often reveals more than words ever could. When an avoidant and an empath both go no contact, the quiet does not stay empty for long. One person may feel relief, the other may feel the weight of loss. Then, little by little, both begin to face emotions they were avoiding before. In this video, you will learn why that silence affects each person so differently, what usually happens in the first days and weeks after no contact begins, and why the outcome is often not what either person expected. Stay until the end, because the final part explains the deeper reason this silence can change both people for good, whether they ever speak again or not. The connection between an avoidant and an empath can create a powerful but painful cycle. One person reaches for closeness, the other pulls back. One keeps trying to hold everything together, the other tries to protect their space. When contact finally stops, that cycle is broken and both people are left alone with their own thoughts. That is when hidden fears, old habits, and unspoken feelings begin to surface. What looks like the end is often the beginning of real emotional truth. This video will walk you through that process step by step. You will see why no contact is not just about waiting for someone to return. It is also about what happens inside each person when the noise stops and the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Some people discover that silence brings clarity, others discover that it brings regret, and sometimes both people change in ways that completely reshape the future of the relationship. If you want to understand the psychology behind this dynamic and why silence can become such a turning point, you are in the right place. Welcome to our channel, and if this kind of content speaks to you, subscribe so you never miss the next video. The first stage of no contact often creates the biggest misunderstanding, because what happens on the surface rarely reflects what is happening inside. Many people assume both individuals will feel the same emotions at the same time, but that is rarely the case. An avoidant and an empath often begin their journey through silence from completely different emotional places. They may be separated by the same distance, yet they are carrying entirely different burdens. This difference can make the silence feel confusing, especially when one person appears to be moving forward while the other feels as though time has stopped. For many avoidant individuals, the first feeling that arrives is not sadness, it is relief. That does not always mean they never cared, or that the relationship meant nothing to them. It simply means the emotional pressure they had been carrying suddenly disappears. During the relationship, they may have felt overwhelmed by emotional conversations, expectations, or the fear that they could never fully meet another person's needs. Even if those expectations were never spoken out loud, they often felt them anyway. When no contact begins, all of that suddenly stops. The phone becomes quiet. There are no difficult messages waiting to be answered. For the first time in a long while, everything feels calm. That calm can feel comforting. It allows them to breathe without feeling emotionally responsible for another person's happiness. They begin focusing on work, personal goals, hobbies, exercise, or routines that make life feel predictable again. Their schedule becomes familiar. Their independence returns. To someone watching from the outside, it may look as though they have moved on almost immediately. They laugh with friends, they complete daily tasks, they seem relaxed. They may even appear happier than they did during the final weeks of the relationship. This is often the moment when the empath begins asking painful questions. They see the avoidant looking calm and naturally assume that calm means they never cared. Every photo, every social interaction, and every ordinary moment becomes another piece of evidence in their mind. They tell themselves that someone who truly loved them would never seem so comfortable after losing the relationship. That belief creates even more pain because it feels personal. It feels as though their love mattered less than they thought. But emotions are not always visible. Some people express them immediately. Others experience them much later. Silence can delay emotional awareness just as easily as it can deepen it. While the avoidant is enjoying the feeling of space, the empath often experiences the exact opposite. The silence feels heavy instead of peaceful. The absence of communication creates a constant awareness that someone important is no longer there. Simple routines suddenly feel different. Morning coffee feels quieter. Evenings seem longer. Small moments that once included another person now become reminders that the relationship has changed. Every familiar place carries memories. Every song brings back another conversation. Every quiet moment gives the mind another opportunity to replay what happened. Instead of feeling relieved by the distance, the empath often feels drawn toward the connection that has disappeared. They think about the final conversation again and again. They wonder whether one different sentence could have changed everything. They replay old arguments while searching for the exact moment things began falling apart. Their mind becomes a collection of unfinished conversations. Questions continue repeating without answers. Did I ask for too much? Should I have been more patient? Why didn't I understand sooner? Could one more conversation have saved us? These questions rarely bring comfort. Instead, they create an emotional loop that becomes difficult to escape. One reason this happens is because many empaths naturally focus on understanding other people before understanding themselves. They are often deeply aware of another person's emotions. They notice changes in mood. They sense discomfort before words are spoken. They remember details that others forget. During the relationship, this ability may have helped them feel close to their partner. But after no contact begins, that same sensitivity can become exhausting. Their mind keeps trying to solve a problem that no longer has new information. They search for answers inside memories instead of living in the present. The avoidant, meanwhile, is often doing something completely different. Rather than reviewing every emotional detail, they may become more focused on practical life. They organize their schedule. They work longer hours. They spend more time alone. They return to activities that make them feel independent. This is not always an attempt to forget the relationship. Sometimes it is simply the way they regulate emotional stress. Staying busy creates structure, and structure feels safe. When life becomes predictable again, difficult emotions seem easier to keep at a distance. This difference in coping styles can easily create false conclusions. The empath believes the avoidant never cared because they appear unaffected. The avoidant believes everything is finally settling down because the emotional pressure has disappeared. Both people believe they understand what is happening. In reality, neither one sees the complete picture. The silence has only just begun. The deepest emotional changes are still hidden beneath the surface. Another important difference appears in the way each person experiences uncertainty. The empath often struggles with unanswered questions. Human beings naturally seek closure, but for someone who values emotional connection, uncertainty can feel especially painful. They may spend hours trying to understand why the relationship ended the way it did. If the ending was unclear, the mind fills in the missing pieces. Unfortunately, those imagined answers are usually much harsher than reality. Self-blame becomes common. The empath begins believing every problem was their fault simply because taking responsibility feels easier than accepting uncertainty. The avoidant often reacts differently. Instead of searching for immediate emotional answers, they may accept the distance as necessary. They tell themselves that the relationship became too stressful. They remind themselves of the conflicts instead of the peaceful moments. This helps them protect their emotional balance in the short term. It allows them to believe they made the right decision or that the silence is for the best. Again, this does not mean those thoughts will remain unchanged forever. It simply reflects what often happens during the earliest stage of no contact. Ironically, both individuals believe they are handling the situation well. The empath believes they are processing their emotions because they are thinking about the relationship constantly. The avoidant believes they are processing it because they have accepted the space and returned to normal routines. Yet neither person has truly reached the deeper emotional work that silence eventually brings. The empath is still focused on the other person instead of themselves. The avoidant is still focused on maintaining distance instead of exploring what created the emotional discomfort in the first place. In different ways, both are avoiding the deeper questions waiting beneath the surface. As the days continue, the emotional intensity begins changing in subtle ways. The empath slowly realizes they cannot spend every waking moment checking their phone. At first, every notification creates hope. Every vibration makes the heart race. Then they discover it is only another email, another advertisement, or another ordinary message from someone else. That small disappointment repeats often enough that it becomes emotionally exhausting. Eventually, even without realizing it, they begin checking less often. Not because they have stopped caring, but because constant hope becomes too painful to carry every hour of the day. The avoidant also experiences small changes, although they may not recognize them yet. Once the excitement of having space settles into everyday life, routines begin feeling ordinary again. The quiet that first felt refreshing simply becomes normal. Work no longer provides the same distraction it did during the first week. Hobbies become familiar again. Daily responsibilities continue exactly as before. The emotional relief remains, but it is no longer new. When distractions lose their novelty, the mind naturally creates room for thoughts that had been pushed aside. Neither person notices that the silence is already changing them. Without arguments, without reassurance, and without constant interaction, they are beginning to spend more time with themselves than they have in a very long time. That quiet self-reflection does not arrive all at once. It grows slowly, almost unnoticed. One ordinary evening becomes two become 10, then weeks pass. The absence of each other slowly becomes the presence of something neither expected. The silence is no longer just empty space between two people. It is becoming a mirror, and that mirror is about to reveal parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. The strange thing about emotional distance is that it does not affect both people at the same time. At first, the avoidant may feel relief while the empath feels the loss more deeply. But as time passes, silence begins to change both of them. For the avoidant, delayed emotions often surface in ordinary moments. A familiar place, a song, or a small memory can bring back feelings they thought were gone. They may start remembering the calm, the comfort, and the quiet support more than the conflict. What once felt like freedom can slowly begin to feel like absence. This is when curiosity replaces certainty. They may wonder how the other person is doing, whether they have moved on, or if they still think about the relationship. Sometimes this leads to a message, sometimes it does not. But curiosity does not always mean growth. Missing someone is not the same as understanding what went wrong. At the same time, the empath begins seeing the relationship more clearly. The pain is no longer as sharp, and they can finally notice the patterns they once excused. They remember the love, but they also remember the loneliness, the waiting, and the emotional weight they carried alone. Love was real, but love alone was not enough. Distance changes perspective for both people. The avoidant begins to understand that emotional safety, consistency, and vulnerability matter more than they realized. The empath begins to understand that love should never require losing themselves. Silence creates clarity, but clarity only becomes healing when it leads to real change. If they ever meet again, everything depends on growth. Time alone does not heal. Old patterns return if neither person has learned anything. But when both people reflect honestly, take responsibility, and communicate in healthier ways, the relationship can become something different. If not, the same cycle usually repeats. That is the real lesson of no contact. Silence is not always punishment. Sometimes it is the space where both people finally begin to see themselves clearly. Silence has a way of making people believe that nothing is happening. The phone stays quiet. The conversations stop. Life seems to move on. But beneath that silence, change is taking place in ways that cannot always be seen. Hearts begin asking questions that busy lives once covered. Old habits become easier to recognize. Emotional wounds that were ignored finally demand attention. What once felt like an ending slowly becomes an opportunity to grow. That is why silence is not always punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. It creates the space that constant communication never could. It forces both people to face themselves before they can truly understand anyone else. For the avoidant, it can become the moment they realize that running from emotional closeness does not make fear disappear. Distance may bring temporary comfort, but lasting peace only comes from facing what has been avoided for so long. For the empath, silence can become the moment they finally understand that loving someone should never require losing themselves. Real love does not ask a person to sacrifice their identity, ignore their needs, or carry the entire emotional weight of a relationship alone. If both people are willing to grow, then no contact was never just about being apart. It became a turning point, a place where emotional patterns could finally be broken, a place where healthier choices could begin. Whether they eventually find their way back to each other or continue on separate paths becomes less important than the people they become along the way. Because the greatest success is not hearing another message or seeing another name appear on your phone. The greatest success is becoming someone who no longer depends on another person to feel complete, someone who values both love and self-respect, and someone who no longer abandons themselves just to keep someone else close. Every relationship leaves behind a lesson. Some teach us how to love, others teach us how to let go. The rarest ones teach us both. And those lessons often become the foundation for healthier relationships in the future, whether with someone new or with the person we once had to lose in order to finally understand ourselves. If this video helped you see this journey from a different perspective, make sure you subscribe to the channel because we explore the hidden psychology behind relationships, attachment styles, emotional healing, and personal growth in every video. There is so much more to discover, and we would love to have you join us on that journey. Also, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people who are struggling with these same questions find answers and encouragement. Share it with a friend, a family member, or anyone who may be going through a season of silence and needs this reminder today. And before you leave, tell us in the comments which part of this journey spoke to you the most. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read. Until next time, keep choosing growth over fear, peace over confusion, and self-respect over self-sacrifice. Because sometimes the loudest transformation does not happen through words. It happens in the silence that teaches you who you truly are.